executives who had already decided that they're going to be good in their 2026 goals. They decided that they weren't the right ones. They decided that it wasn't the right direction. They decided that it just wasn't lighting up their team. And we're not even at the end of January yet. We still have a whole week of January. So I was talking with one of them, and this in particular, she was she's a VP in a mid-sized tech company. And she told me we spent 2 days in December doing strategic planning, came out with a beautiful plan, priorities mapped, and the KPIs already defined and ready to go, the whole thing. So I asked her what happened. And she said she looked at it every morning and felt nothing. It was like she's staring at someone else's plan. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. She said she just can't make herself care enough to do it, and trying to motivate her team to stick to it was even harder. So here's what we talked about. I was like, and if you're listening and your 2026 goals feel like they're an obligation instead of a direction, I need you to hear this too. You don't have a strategy problem. You have a clarity problem. And that clarity problem is about to cost you the whole year. Because here's what happens every January. Leaders sit down, or their organizations sit down, and they build goals based on what worked last year, what the market is doing, what the board expects, and what looks expensive on paper. And they walk away with a plan that's logical, defensible, and completely disconnected from who they actually are. Then they spend the entire year trying to execute a strategy that was never aligned with their identity in the first place. So that's not leadership, that's performance. And performance without alignment, well, that's the fast track to burnout, resentment, and the quiet thought that keeps showing up at 2 a.m. Is this really what I want to be doing? So here's what most leaders do when their goals feel forced. 1, they think they need a better strategy. How many times have you just I just need a different strategy. I need a better strategy. So they go back to the drawing board. And this one I know as well, because this is one of my tendencies. And so this is one of my roadblocks and my blind spots. But they go back to the drawing board and they refine the plan. They get more specific with KPIs and they break things down into smaller milestones. Or they think, I just need more discipline. So they download another productivity app. They have a time blocker on their calendar, they wake up earlier, and then they try to white knuckle their way into caring about the goals that still feel hollow. Or, and this is the really expensive one, they think, maybe I just need a new role. They start looking externally for what they're actually missing internally. And here's the problem. None of these address the real issue. None of these do. Because the reason your goals feel forced isn't because your strategy is weak. It's because your strategy was built without clarity on who you are and what you're actually trying to build. So I see this consistently. I see this all the time. Leaders have spent thousands and sometimes tens of thousands on strategic planning consultants, executive coaches, leadership retreats, and they come with beautiful decks, sophisticated frameworks, and in very imperfect language. And about 6 weeks later, they're back where they started, starting at goals that feel like someone else's life. And let me tell you what nobody's saying. Most strategic planning is just expensive theater. It creates the illusion of clarity because you fill the room with smart people, spend 2 days talking, and produce a document. And this document, you can, you do visioning and you get on board with it. But if the plan doesn't connect with your actual identity, your values, your wiring, and what you're uniquely built to create, it's just well-organized noise. And stay with me here, because I'm going to go a little bit deeper, because the reason organizations spend so much money on strategic planning and see so little lasting change is because they're asking the wrong questions. They're asking, what should we do? When the real question is, who are we and what are we building from that place? So strategy without identity is just borrowed ambition. And how many times have we put our goals in our ideas for goals into ChatGPT and just spit out the goals and use that to create a beautiful strategic plan? But ambition doesn't survive contact with reality. Those goals that you created on Chat or on Perplexity or whatever AI or whatever external location, external entity you created it from, it doesn't survive the contact with reality. So here's what's actually happening. Strategy without identity equals performance without peace. So let me break that down for you. When you build goals based on external expectations instead of internal alignment, you end up performing your way through the year. You end up with goals that you're trying to just act upon instead of embody. And so for my clients, you're going to recognize this as the have, do, be when we really want be, do, have. So you hit all the metrics, you execute the plan, you check the boxes, but inside you're exhausted. You're resentful. You're wondering why success doesn't feel the way you thought it would. It's because you're leading from strategy, not clarity. And I know what you're saying here. You're like, Tami, we need strategy. We need tactics. We need action. I need results. The thing is, clarity isn't about having more information. It's about seeing yourself accurately. It's about we talked a couple podcasts ago about the fact that alignment means that all the pieces are there. They're just not in the right order. And so most leaders, especially the high-performing ones, they spent so much time adapting, achieving, and proving that they've lost touch with who they actually are underneath the performance. What got you to this place, or what drove you to this role in the first place? And so when they sit down to plan, they default to. And this is so common. This is not something I want you to feel guilty about. This is something I want you to consider. Is this something you're doing? What's worked before? What looks good to others or on LinkedIn? And what feels safe and defensible? So instead of those questions, we should be asking, what aligned with my values? Am I uniquely wired to create this? Or what am I uniquely wired to create? And what would I build if I trusted myself completely? And this works with your company's overall goals as well. What part of the goal am I responsible for? And how does it align with my values? How am I uniquely wired to create these? And what would I build if I trusted myself? What would I allow my people to do if I trusted myself? And here's the misconception. This is the misconception that I really want to destroy. More words do not equal more clarity. I've seen 40-page strategic plans that are completely unclear. And I've seen leaders summarize the entire document in 3 sentences, and it's crystal clear. Clarity isn't verbose. It's not wordy. Clarity is precise. Clarity is not about explaining everything. It's about knowing what matters. And clarity doesn't come from external validation. It comes from internal alignment. And you have clarity because your decisions feel settled and not second-guessed. Your direction is simple to articulate. Your energy aligns with your actions, and you can say no without guilt because you're very clear on your yes. You don't have clarity when you keep revisiting or circling the same decisions. You can't explain your direction without a 10-minute monologue, and you're exhausted by things that should energize you or that used to energize you. And you say yes to everything because you're not clear on anything. And stay with me here. This is why I talk so much about the first phase of my SHINE framework, the See with strategic clarity, because you can't build an aligned year or an aligned leadership presence if you don't see yourself accurately first. So strategic clarity means understanding your core drivers and what motivates you at the root. See your wiring, your strengths, your blind spots, and how you show up under pressure. And you've identified your values, not just borrowed someone else's. And this is even if you're like, Tami, we have core values for our organization. How do your values play into those core values? But you have to understand yourself first so you can see, okay, how can I, if you want to, if your organization has a goal of, 300 million a year and you are the sales team, yes, I get it. It's your responsibility to bring in the contracts that meet that. But what values, if you value relationship, what relationships can you build that would help you get the contracts that get to the 300 million? But if you understand, if it's just the matter of the bottom dollar, it doesn't align with your values. It doesn't align with the value of building relationships. See how that's different? And you can't just borrow someone else's. And you know what you're uniquely created to design or designed to create, either way. But inside the aligned leadership experience, this is where we use tools like the Enneagram, Clifton Strengths, and we don't just stop at the assessments because the assessments itself is not enough. So many times I talk with clients, I talk with companies and teams who are like, we've done all the assessments. I was like, great. And how do you use them? How do they help you? How do they influence your goals and your actions daily, monthly, yearly? Because when we integrate the assessments, we connect the who you are with what you're building. And it's we really want to reverse engineer this because when strategy flows from identity, execution feels different. And so when you have your end goal, and then you back up to be like, okay, who do I need to be? What values do I need to show up in order to do that? It's not force, it's aligned. It's not a performance, it's a presence. And that's the reset most leaders are missing. So if you're listening and you're thinking, okay, I get it. I need clarity, but how do I actually get it? I'm so glad you asked, because here's where we start. The clarity reset isn't about doing more. It's about seeing differently. And so most leaders, including me, when I first started leading, most leaders approach goal setting by asking, what do I need to accomplish? What does the organization need from me? And what would impress the board or my boss? These aren't bad questions, but if you start there, you're building from the outside in, and your secret sauce, your zone of genius, your strengths are not going to show through here. So what we need to do is we need a clarity reset that flips it. So you start by asking, who are you at your core? What drives you? What motivates you? What gets you up in the morning? What gets you excited? What are you uniquely wired to create? And what would I build if external validation was not a factor? Then, and only then, do you map the strategy. Because when you build from identity first, your goals don't feel forced, they feel inevitable. They feel effortless. And that shift is from performance-driven goals to alignment-driven direction. And that's what creates sustainable leadership. It also allows for flexibility. Because if you have the container that you want versus the specific steps that someone gives you, then you're able to flex and shift with the market. You're able to flex and shift with the culture. You're able to flex and shift with, when things come up from out of nowhere. So not leadership that looks good on LinkedIn, but this is leadership that feels true in your gut. It's this alignment-driven direction. All right. So here's what I want you to do this week. Before you revamp or finalize any more of your 2026 goals, or you decide to try to chuck them at all, I'm going to give you a 3-question clarity audit. So these aren't fluffy questions. These are diagnostic questions that reveal whether your goals are aligned or borrowed. So go grab a notebook. I'll wait. Or put me on pause. And let's do this. Okay, so question 1. If no one was watching, what would you actually want to create this year? Not what would impress people, not what do you think you should want, but what do you actually want? If the question came up and feels embarrassing, too small, or too big, write it down anyway. It doesn't, at this point, we're just getting information out. We're just starting to craft this idea of what do you actually want? And there's so many times that people don't ask themselves that. What's your real direction that is trying to surface? So write it down no matter what the answer is. Okay, so question 2, what am I currently doing that drains me, even though it looks good on paper? This is the performance trap question. What are you doing that you think you're supposed to be doing? Because it worked before, because it's what people expect? Make a list. And this typically is a list. Then ask yourself, what would happen if I stopped doing these? One by one, if I stopped doing these. And if the answer is nothing catastrophic, you've just identified a performance pattern and not an aligned commitment. You want to look to see, we don't have time for performance. We don't have time to just do the things that look good, but don't get the needle moving. In this day and age, we have information, things are moving so fast that we've got to get clear on the direction we're going, and we need to filter out all the junk. So question 3, what would I do if I trusted my own judgment completely? This is the conviction question. This is the most leaders don't lack strategy. They lack the trust in their own clarity. There we go. That's what I'm trying to say. So they keep seeking external validation. And again, this may not be, I need someone's approval. This may mean looking at, is this what the board wants from me? Is this what my leader wants? Or is this what my team is looking for? And this is looking to ChatGPT for the how-tos. More data, more opinions, more proof. How many times have you done that? Looking at just external validation, or just kind of gone through ChatGPT and said, okay, what do I need to do here? But clarity doesn't come from consensus. It comes from conviction. Consensus is not always a bad thing, but you need to own it first. So ask yourself, if I trusted myself fully, what would I do? That answer, that's your aligned direction. And here's what I want you to do with these answers. I want you to take these 3 questions and the answers to them, and I want you to compare them to your 2026 goals. If there's alignment, great. You're building from a identity. But if there's a gap, that gap is so expensive. That's where burnout lives. That's where resentment is built. So that's where you end up spending the year performing instead of leading, and you don't actually get the goals that you set out to get in the first place. That's the reset most leaders need in 2026. And luckily, we're still in January, so you have time to realign and get things moving and have an extremely profitable and fulfilling 2026. And your leadership will feel all more fulfilled and effortless and aligned, and you won't have those Sunday doldrums when you know what you're doing aligns with what matters to you. So if you did this audit and you realize that your 2026 goals are misaligned, here's what to do. One is, don't ignore this. The gap between performance-driven goals and alignment-driven direction, that gap is where burnout lives. So don't, like I said, burnout, resentment, and this is where you spend your year leading someone else's life too. I want to help you close the gap. So I created a training video. It's a clarity diagnostics designed especially for high-level leaders who are navigating transitions or need to rebuild from alignment and not just execute another plan. So it's a 10-minute video, and you'll see 3 specific areas that you're performing instead of leading and what to do about it. So go and watch the video. And then at the end of it, you're going to have the option to book an aligned leadership audit with me. If you want to go deeper, there's no commitment. The training's free. The call is complimentary. However, the clarity is priceless. So the link is in the show notes. And I know if you're thinking, I don't have time for this. I don't even have time for a 10-minute video, but I know something needs to shift. Just book a call directly with me, TamiMarieCoaching.com/call, and we'll diagnose it together. So next week, we're talking about better communication and why it isn't solving your team's problems and what the actually reveals about your leadership alignment. So if you're leading a team and you're tired of having the same circular meetings, you're going to want to hear this. So I'll see you then. All right. Bye for now.